As the president grows increasingly isolated, the attention turns to those who would be president. This week, we'll look at who are they and how are they positioning themselves for the 2008 campaign.
We'll ask two of our favorite political analysts, the San Francisco Chronicle's Carla Marinucci and Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution. The game is presidential politics. The game is on.
I'm Bob Marks.
And I'm Mark Simon. Welcome to the game. We're talking presidential politics, and we're just awash in it. It's January of '07, and we're already talking about moving primaries and who's going to run and 16 different people. But before we do that, we have to dispense with George W. Bush, who just had his State of the Union address and took a whole different tone, but basically the same strategy, Bill. Yeah. Did he do himself any good? Or it looks as though not only that, but he was trying to revive domestic policy initiatives that have already failed him. It looks like he's staying the course on Iraq and trying to stay the course on his domestic policies and trying a new tone rather than a new approach.
Yeah, well, I think he is right now what Winston Churchill once said of Clement Attlee. He is a modest man with much to be modest about. The speech actually I thought was better than most people anticipated. He does so much better in front of an audience than he does by himself in those isolated White House speeches, which I think are just death. The domestic agenda, ironically, there's not much going to happen on the domestic front. Let's be honest. The health care plan that he talked about was declared dead on arrival by Pete Stark after he gave it. They might do something together in energy. It won't be the Manhattan Project or anything like that, sending the man to the moon. What he did with this speech, though, is he bought himself time. He bought himself 6 or 8 months to see what happens next in Iraq, and I think that was the main purpose of the speech that night. He had a very effective soundbite. I thought, let's give it a chance.
Carla, there are a host of Republicans getting ready to run for president. I don't think any of them want this war wrapped around their neck, and it looks like the president's going to be of no help to them in that
Absolutely.
regard.
That seemed to be part of the president's plan, I think, at least throw out some domestic things so that the Republicans in the audience who want to run would have something to go back and talk to voters about. You're absolutely right when we're talking about the Republicans who are out there in front, McCain, Giuliani, Romney. These guys are all wrestling with the war. And it doesn't help the president, too, but the next day after he gave his speech, Cheney was out there giving a very combative interview to Wolf Blitzer on CNN. I think didn't help the president at all. I mean, this is the kind of problem that he's got right now.
Actually, I don't think the Republican candidates are wrestling with the war so much. I mean, McCain and Romney and Giuliani, the presumed 3 frontrunners on the Republican side, they've pretty much identified themselves as with the president and with the surge. You know, McCain was talking about the surge before the surge became a trendy thing to talk about. Where the trouble is if 6 or 8 months from now, Iraq is still the daily topic on the conversation, and that'll be death for these guys. But there's a flip side to this too, and that is if you're a Democratic candidate right now, some of the prominent Democrats, John Edwards, of the 3 frontrunners who are Edwards and Romney and what's her name from New York, Hillary Clinton. That's right.
Obama.
Now Obama has identified himself as very anti-war.
Yeah.
John Edwards is
He's
even more.
lucky he wasn't there in the Senate when the vote.
That's right. He says if he's here, would have voted against it. John Edwards has said that his vote was a mistake.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton still trying to figure out exactly where she is.
Yeah.
Now, what happens if 6 to 8 months from now the Bush plan flops? What do these folks have to say about pulling out troops and cutting off funding?
You're right. That's where the wrestling comes in. We still don't know what's going to happen, how this is all going to come down. Everybody's trying to walk that tightrope that gets them there to the nomination.
Bill, what about this? You know, everybody in Congress has a resolution on how to deal with the president, but the reality is there really isn't anything they could do. I mean, the troops are already starting to arrive in Iraq. So is there anything that Congress can do to affect the president's plans?
Not really, except sort of be like Dean Wormer in Animal House and pass double secret probation on the president and really be upset with what he's doing. What they can do is make a lot of noise and investigate to death. And I think that's the next thing to watch and see if the Democrats take a different tack. Instead of complaining about the direction of the war, go back now to how we got in this situation and go back and start investigating Halliburton, investigate intelligence, and just start dragging administration officials.
When you got Republicans like John Warner raising some very serious questions, this has got to be a real problem for the president.
The point Bill's making is the House may be where the action is now, because Pelosi was actually fairly subdued after the president's speech. They let the Senate take the formal response, although apparently people think Webb did very, very well. Jim Webb of Virginia did very well on his response.
That's right,
but okay, Is the war going to be an issue in 08? I know you don't know, but what do you think? Is it going to be an issue?
I don't see how you can escape it. No matter, even in the best case scenario, the question is, how do we get ourselves into this in the first place? What does it cost? And at what price other programs and issues in this country have suffered, even in the best case scenario?
Yeah, it's first of all, it's obviously a threshold candidate for any candidate. Not so much about Iraq, perhaps, but what will you do about Iran? Would you support military operations in Iran? Every politician is going to have to think about what they want to do on that. But then the second way in which Iraq is a factor here is just the overall mood of the electorate. If a year and a half from now the fighting is continuing, Americans are still dying on a daily basis, it is going to be a bitter, divided electorate, and it'll be a very fertile ground for an anti-war candidate to assume the presidency. One
of the things you heard about during the midterm elections over and over again was the desire of people for there to be some, at least appearance of a consensus on this issue. Right. It certainly looks like we're not starting the year with one. Is there the potential for one at all? Is there, or is it something we're just going to have to muddle through until we find, still someone finds a way out?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the president's problem. You know, Stephen Colbert said this week, we know that the government that governs less governs best. Well, then that's what we've got in Iraq. That's the Republican. So the Republicans have to answer for where is this consensus going to come in Iraq? How is it going to happen? Is the government going to get it together there and get the message? And as Bill said, all these surrounding and peripheral problems that come with it. How do Republicans and Democrats sit down? We did at least see, I think, at the State of the Union, a more conciliatory approach from the Democrats. You know, the Republicans, when they took power, were booing Bill Clinton in the audience at many points in his State of the Union addresses. That did not happen. There wasn't that kind of outright. Pelosi sort of gave the message that, yes, we're going to have respect and try and listen.
So they're conciliatory in terms of cosmetics. Now, how many Democrats had a speech said, yeah, I want to work with the president. I want to sit down and discuss his health care plan. I want to work with him on energy.
What they did say, which is what Pelosi needed to say, was, we look forward to the president working with us, which is, I suppose, better than it's dead on arrival, which is often what you heard the Republicans say about Clinton.
She was fascinating to watch during the speech because, as you know, there's so much choreography and showmanship here, and there's always a question of when to stand up and clap and when to not. And you can see a few times where she was, it's like on the old "What's My Line" show, where you kind of at the end you get up and you don't want to get up. She was kind of thinking, oh, maybe I should stand up and support it. No, maybe I shouldn't applaud. So
standing up, and exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the next race that's coming up. So, Bill, let me start with you. The first thing is, who are the Republican candidates out there that are talking about running or that are running?
Or maybe a better way, that we should at least take a little bit seriously.
Yeah. We should call this the Carla Marinucci Full-Time Employment Act, by the way, as it never stops for her.
It's not her fault that the campaigns never end, you know.
Yes.
Political reporters, this is a dream, I must say.
Exactly. Okay, of the 8 or so Republicans, Lord knows how many there are. I didn't check my BlackBerry to see who else has jumped in. There are 3 serious contenders, and that's Senator McCain, that is Governor Romney, and then former Mayor Giuliani. I think the other 5 just really don't fit in the landscape.
Candidates like Congressman Duncan Hunter.
Hunter from California, and Sam Brownback, the senator from Kansas, Tom Tancredo, running in some cases to make a message about immigration, some cases running just because they're out of office anyway in a couple of years.
Vice presidential.
Does that mean that Romney is the conservative in this race? I mean, how are these people positioning themselves, or is it too early to tell?
They're interesting. So far, Romney all 3 are sort of running against themselves in one way or another. McCain is running against the maverick image from 2000. You know, McCain has a big plus in that he has very high approval ratings around the country, and because of his background, who he is, people tend to like him automatically. On the other hand, within conservative Republican circles, they know that John McCain has been something of a shadow president for the last 6 years, who has not been shy about criticizing the president. So he has to sort of, he has to make up with that.
On the other hand, he's made inroads or tried to talk to some of the evangelicals that he angered the last time around, and some of the people on the other side who liked him are now wondering, who is this guy really? So I think he's hurt himself on that.
Rudy Giuliani, on the other hand, America's mayor. If you think of 9/11, you think of Rudy Giuliani, a stand-up guy. He's been spending a lot of time in the South talking in particular to Southern Baptists about